I took care of my father for 27 years and only inherited an old box. My brothers laughed, but when I opened it, Sarah Miller was sitting in the living room of the house where she had spent the last 27 years of her life, watching her two brothers divide all of their father's assets as if she were invisible. At 40 years old, she had dedicated her entire youth and adulthood to caring for Arthur Miller, a stubborn man who developed diabetes and later heart problems, requiring constant care. It was when the attorney called her name that attention turned to her for the first time that tense afternoon. Jason and Kevin stopped talking about selling the mansion in the upscale neighborhood of the small coastal town in Maine and looked in her direction with curiosity. She felt her heart race, thinking that perhaps her father had left something special for the one who had truly cared for him all these years. The attorney adjusted his glasses and read in a clear voice, "To my daughter Sarah Miller, who dedicated her life to my care, I leave the yellow wooden box that is in my bedroom, along with all its contents." A heavy silence filled the room. Sarah felt her cheeks burn with shame as her brothers exchanged glances of contempt. Was that it? An old, faded box she had seen 1,000 times in her father's room, but had never been interested in opening. Jason was the first to let out a bitter laugh. "An old box? What a joke! Dad really knew how to value the one who sacrificed for him, huh?" Kevin shook his head with disdain. "At least now we know what he really thought about our dear little sister. 27 years taking care of him to get a piece of rotten wood." Her brother's words cut like razors. Sarah had imagined this moment so many times, dreaming that perhaps her father would somehow recognize all her sacrifice. She never married, never had children, never built a career, all because Arthur Miller needed constant care after his first heart attack at 60. The attorney tried to maintain his professional composure, but his discomfort with the situation was visible. "Well, I believe all points of the will have been clarified. The documents for the transfer of the property and the bank accounts will be ready next week." Jason stood up and walked to the window, looking at the garden that would soon be his and his brother's property. "Sarah, you have 2 weeks to get your things out of here. We're putting the house up for sale immediately." 2 weeks. Sarah finally found her voice, though it came out shaky. "This has been my home for over 20 years. I have nowhere to go." Kevin laughed cruelly. "You should have thought of that before wasting your life playing nurse. Now you'll have to learn to fend for yourself in the real world." Her brother's coldness was nothing new. During all the years of care, they would appear sporadically, always in a hurry, always with excuses not to help. Jason lived in Washington, D.C. and had important commitments with his import company. Kevin lived abroad, building an international career, as he said, though no one knew exactly what he did there. Meanwhile, Sarah never left the house for more than a few hours. She woke up every day at 5 in the morning to prepare her father's medications, took his blood pressure, controlled his diet, took him to doctor's appointments, bathed him when necessary, and stayed awake on nights when he was unwell. "You were always the favorite daughter indeed," Jason said sarcastically. "Just look at how he demonstrated that." Sarah gripped the arms of the armchair tightly, trying not to break down in tears in front of them. "I took care of him because I loved him, not because I expected a reward." "How utterly foolish," murmured Kevin. "Love doesn't pay the bills, little sister. You should have learned this a long time ago." The attorney put the documents back in his briefcase, visibly uncomfortable with the situation. "If you need any clarification, I'll be available. Good afternoon, everyone." After he left, the siblings immediately began discussing plans for the property. The house was one of the most valued in the region, with a view of the sea and spacious gardens that Arthur had tended personally before falling ill. "The realtor said we can get at least $2 million if we renovate the kitchen," said Jason, flipping through some papers. "It's worth investing in the renovation," agreed Kevin. "Splitting it 50-50, each of us walks away with a clean $1 million. Sarah watched them talking as if she weren't there. Her whole life, her dreams, her sacrifices, reduced to a temporary obstacle for their financial plans. "Can I at least stay until I find a place?" she asked timidly. Jason didn't even look at her. 2 weeks, Sarah. We don't have time to waste on sentimentality." That night, after the brothers left to have dinner at an expensive restaurant in town, Sarah went up to her father's room for the first time since the funeral. The room still carried his scent. a mix of medicine and old cologne that she had bought for him every month for years. The box was in its usual place, on the dark wooden dresser. It was a simple piece, painted yellow long ago, with the paint peeling in several spots. Sarah had never shown curiosity about its contents because she respected her father's privacy. She picked up the box with trembling hands and noticed it was heavier than expected. There was a small golden lock, but she couldn't find the key anywhere. She gently shook the object and heard the sound of papers moving inside. What kind of documents had her father kept there? Perhaps they were old letters from her mother, who had left when Sarah was just 15. Mrs. Martha had never been able to handle Arthur's difficult personality, and one day simply packed her bags and left, leaving the 3 children behind. Sarah vaguely remembered her mother talking about a special box where she kept important things. Could it be the same box? And if it was, what could it contain that was so valuable? That night she could barely sleep. The cruel comments from her brothers echoed in her mind, mixing with memories of the last years caring for her father. How many times had she thought of giving up, of leaving and building her own life? But whenever she considered that possibility, Arthur would fall ill, and she would feel guilty just thinking about abandoning him. Now, at 40 years old, she was alone in the world, with no profession, no savings, no prospects. The little money she had saved came from sporadic sewing jobs she did at home, always in the intervals between caring for her father. The next morning, Jason showed up early with a team of professionals to evaluate the house. Sarah watched them measuring rooms and taking notes, treating her home as a simple commodity. "Where's that ridiculous box Dad left for you?" asked Jason when he found Sarah in the kitchen. "In my room," she replied, not wanting to give more details. "I hope you don't plan on taking furniture. The inheritance was very clear, just the box and what's inside." The cruelty of the words hurt deeply. Sarah had chosen every piece of furniture in the house together with her father, had cared for every object as if it were her own. Now everything would be sold or donated, as if her presence there had never mattered. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, please take a moment to leave a like and especially subscribe to the channel. It helps us a lot as we're just starting out. Now continuing. During lunch, Kevin made a point of rubbing in her face the grand plans he had for his share of the inheritance. "I'm going to invest in tech stocks. The market is up and I could double my money in a few years." Jason nodded enthusiastically. "I was thinking of expanding the company. With $1 million in capital, I can import more modern equipment." "And what about you, Sarah?" asked Kevin with false concern. "What are your plans now that you'll have to work for the first time in your life?" The question was like a slap in the face. Sarah had worked for 27 years, every single day, without a break, without a vacation, without recognition. The fact she hadn't received a salary didn't mean she hadn't worked. "I'll manage," was all she could reply. "Maybe you should look for a job as a housekeeper," Jason suggested sarcastically. "At least you have experience cleaning and taking care of sick people." Sarah got up from the table and went to her room, unable to bear any more humiliation. She took the box and examined it again, looking for a way to open it without damaging the wood. The lock seemed old and well-maintained, suggesting it had been used regularly. She thought about breaking the lock with a hammer, but something stopped her from destroying what might be her father's last gift. There must be a key somewhere in the house. She just needed to search better. She spent the entire afternoon rummaging through drawers, cabinets, and even the pockets of her father's clothes. In a shoebox at the back of the closet, she found stacks of letters yellowed with age. They were old correspondence, some dated more than 30 years ago. One of the letters caught her attention because it was in a different, more modern envelope. The date showed it had been written just 6 months before her father's departure. Sarah hesitated, but decided to read it, hoping to find some clue about the key. "My dear Martha," the letter said in her father's shaky handwriting, "I know you will never read this letter, but I need to write it anyway. Our children have grown up, and each has gone their own way, but only Sarah stayed with me. Jason and Kevin visit me out of obligation, but she takes care of me out of love. Sometimes I feel guilty for keeping my daughter here, but I am too selfish to let her go." Sarah felt her eyes fill with tears. Her father knew about the sacrifice she was making, knew he was stealing her best years. She continued reading with a heavy heart. Martha, do you remember our yellow box? The one where we kept important documents when we were young? It's still here, and I've decided it will be Sarah's gift when I'm gone. Inside is everything she needs to know about how much I love and value her." The letter ended with a confession of love for the wife who had left so many years ago, but it did not reveal where the key was. Sarah put the letter away carefully, moved to discover that her father truly recognized her sacrifice. In the following days, the pressure from her brothers increased. They brought in a real estate agent who measured every corner of the house and made suggestions for improvements. Sarah felt like an intruder in her own home, watching strangers plan changes to the place where she had been happy with her father. "The renovation will cost about $50,000, Jason said after the appraisal, "but it could increase the house's value by at least $300,000. It's worth the investment." "I agree," said Kevin. "And has Sarah found a place to live yet?" "I'm still looking," she murmured, though she hadn't even started looking. The reality of having to leave was so painful, she preferred not to think about it. "The deadline won't be extended," Jason warned firmly. "If you don't leave willingly, we'll have to take legal measures." The threat was clear. Sarah understood that her brothers were willing to use any means to get her out of there as quickly as possible. That night, she decided to search for the key more systematically. She started with her father's study, a small room where he used to pay bills and take notes. It was a space Sarah rarely entered, respecting his private area. The drawers were filled with old documents, electricity bill receipts, bank statements, and various papers. In a blue folder, she found documents related to the purchase of the house, the children's birth certificates, and the parents' marriage certificate. That's when she noticed something strange. At the bottom of the main drawer was a small bump, as if something were hidden beneath the wooden lining. Sarah carefully felt around and found a nearly invisible small lever. Upon pulling it, a section of the bottom lifted, revealing a secret compartment. Inside, wrapped in a piece of blue silk cloth, was a golden key that seemed exactly what she was looking for. With her heart racing, Sarah ran to her room and tried the key in the box's lock. It fit perfectly, turning with a soft click that echoed like music in her ears. Before opening it completely, she took a deep breath. Whatever was inside represented her father's last message to her. With trembling hands, she lifted the lid of the box. What she saw left her completely stunned. The box was full of documents, but they weren't old letters or photographs as she had expected. They were bank receipts, all in her name, dated over the last 15 years. Sarah picked up the first document in disbelief. It was a deposit slip for $5,000 into an account she didn't know she owned. The date showed the deposit had been made exactly 15 years ago. She picked up another receipt and another. All showed regular monthly deposits of $5,000 into a checking account opened in her name at the town's First National Trust. Sarah had never received statements for this account, never knew of its existence. With hands shaking violently, she began to count the receipts. They were 15 years of monthly deposits, totaling 180 deposits of $5,000 each. Even with her limited math, she could calculate that there was nearly $1 million waiting for her. At the bottom of the box, she found a folded letter with her name written in her father's familiar handwriting. She opened it carefully, trying to process the impossible discovery she had just made. "My dear daughter Sarah," the letter began, "if you are reading this, it means you have finally found the key and discovered my little secret. 15 years ago, when I realized my health was worsening and that you would never abandon me, I decided to start saving money for your future." Sarah had to stop reading to wipe the tears blurring her vision. Her father had planned all this over a decade ago. "Every month I withdrew $5,000 from my account and deposited it into your secret account. Your brothers never suspected because I was always discreet with finances. They thought I spent that money on expensive medicines or private consultations. The revelation was surreal. During all those years of hardship, of financial worries, of having to save every penny, there was nearly $1 million waiting for her in a bank account. I knew you would never leave me," the letter continued. "I knew your heart was too generous. But I also knew your brothers had no consideration for you. They were always greedy and selfish, just waiting for my departure to take whatever they could. Her father's words confirmed everything she had always suspected about her brother's character, but it hurt to read the truth written so directly. "Sarah, you sacrificed the best years of your life to care for a stubborn old man like me. While Jason built his company and Kevin traveled the world, you were here, day and night, caring for me with a dedication I never deserved." "Don't say that, Dad," murmured Sarah through her tears, as if he could hear her. "This money is just a small way to repay all the love you have given me. It is not an inheritance, daughter. It is payment for the years of work you never charged for. It is the recognition that you were the only one who truly loved me." Sarah needed to pause her reading, completely overwhelmed by emotion. Her father had seen everything, had understood her sacrifice, and had found a way to reward her without her brothers finding out. "Now you have the resources to start a new life, far from the cruelty of your brothers. You can buy a house, travel, study, do everything you always wanted but never could because of me. Use this money to be happy, my daughter. You deserve all the happiness in the world." The letter ended with a practical instruction. "All the account documents are in the box. Go to the bank early tomorrow and confirm everything is in order. And remember, you owe nothing to anyone. Every cent of this money was earned through your work and dedication." Sarah remained seated on the bed for hours, holding the letter and trying to process the impossible turn in her life. One morning she was a 40-year-old woman with no prospects, no money, no future. Now she discovered she was practically a millionaire. The irony was devastating. While her brothers celebrated inheriting $2 million to split between them, she had received nearly $1 million just for herself. And most importantly, this money had been saved specifically for her work and dedication. The next morning, Sarah woke up early and dressed carefully. She placed all the documents from the box into a folder and headed to the bank, still somewhat suspicious that it all might just be an impossible dream. The bank manager, Mr. Ronald, had known the Miller family for decades. When Sarah presented the documents, he immediately confirmed the existence of the account. "Your account has been active for exactly 15 years, Mrs. Sarah," he said, consulting the computer. "The current balance is $900,000, the result of regular monthly deposits and savings interest." $900,000. The amount was even larger than she had calculated, thanks to the interest accumulated over the years. Sarah had to hold on to the chair to keep from fainting. "Your father was very careful with the instructions," the manager continued. "He always asked that statements not be sent to the house, justifying that he wanted to surprise you in the future." Can I withdraw this money?" asked Sarah with a trembling voice. "Of course you can. It's your account. But I recommend leaving part of it invested and withdrawing only what you need at the moment." Sarah withdrew only $5,000, an amount that would give her peace of mind for the next few days while she organized her life. She left the bank in a state of shock, still processing the discovery that she was no longer a poor, dependent woman. When she arrived home, she found Jason and Kevin in the living room, discussing renovation details with a contractor. "Where were you?" asked Jason impatiently. "We hope you're not delaying our schedule because of sentimentality." "I went to take care of some business," replied Sarah, trying to keep her voice neutral. Kevin laughed disdainfully. "What business could you possibly have to take care of?" "Looking for a housekeeping job." The cruelty of the comments didn't affect her as before. For the first time in 27 years, Sarah felt truly independent and secure. "Actually, I'm thinking of looking for a house to buy," she said calmly. The two brothers stopped talking and looked at her in astonishment. "Buy?" repeated Jason incredulously. "With what money? You don't even have a bank account." "Yes, I do," replied Sarah with a new confidence in her voice, "and I have sufficient funds to buy a property outright." Kevin let out a sarcastic laugh. "What fantasy is this, little sister? You think we'll believe you saved up money by taking care of Dad? You don't have to believe it," said Sarah calmly. "I'm just letting you know I won't need help to move." The change in her behavior clearly disturbed the two men. The Sarah they knew was submissive, insecure, always asking permission for everything. This new confident and mysterious version intrigued and bothered them at the same time. "Where did you get this money?" insisted Jason, his voice laden with suspicion. "That's none of your business," she replied, using a tone she had never used with her brothers. That night, after the brothers went out for dinner, Sarah allowed herself to dream of the possibilities opening before her. She could buy a small, cozy house near the beach. She could go back to school, maybe take a college course she'd always wanted. She could travel, see places she'd only seen in photographs. But above all, she could live with dignity, without depending on anyone's goodwill. In the following days, the brothers intensified the pressure for her to reveal the source of her mysterious funds. They secretly searched her room, looking for evidence, but Sarah had stored all important documents in a safe deposit box at the bank. "You're hiding something," accused Kevin during dinner. "People like you don't just have money saved up out of nowhere." "People like me," repeated Sarah, feeling a spark of anger. "What do you mean, people like me?" "People who never really worked, who always depended on others," he explained cruelly. "I worked every day for the last 27 years, Sarah replied firmly. "The fact that you don't recognize it as work doesn't mean it wasn't." Jason slammed his fist on the table. "Taking care of Dad wasn't work, it was a daughter's duty. We're his children too. Then where were you during the early mornings when he was sick? Where were you when he needed a bath, medicine, company?" Sarah's voice was rising, years of hurt finally finding expression. "We had our own lives to take care of," said Kevin defensively. "We couldn't drop everything like you." "I had a life too," Sarah exploded. "I had to give up boyfriends, marriage, children, a career, everything. Do you think it was easy? Do you think it was a choice?" The silence that followed was tense. For the first time, Sarah had confronted her brothers about years of neglect and selfishness. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, please take a moment to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It helps us a lot as we're just starting out, now continuing. Jason was the first to recover from the shock. "No one told you to sacrifice so much. You could have hired a nurse." "With what money?" shouted Sarah. "You never offered a single cent to help with Dad's costs." The accusation was true and painful. During all the years of illness, Arthur bore his medical expenses alone, always refusing to ask his wealthier children for help. "What matters is that it's over now," said Kevin, trying to end the discussion. "Everyone goes their own way and that's it." "Exactly," agreed Sarah, but with a tone that suggested she had specific plans. "Everyone goes their own way." That night she called a real estate agent and scheduled viewings for several houses in town. She wanted something far from there, where she could start completely from scratch, away from painful memories and the toxic presence of her brothers. The first house she visited was a cozy property 2 blocks from the beach, with 3 bedrooms and a small but well-kept garden. The asking price was $400,000, an amount she could pay in cash without compromising much of her savings. "Are you in a position to secure financing?" asked the realtor, a pleasant woman named Mrs. Brenda. "I won't need financing," Sarah replied calmly. "I can pay in cash." The realtor's expression of surprise was evident. She clearly hadn't expected a woman of simple appearance to have such resources available. Over the weekend, Sarah visited 3 more properties, all within her financial means. She wanted to make a careful decision, to choose a place where she could be truly happy. When she returned home on Sunday evening, she found her brothers waiting for her in the living room, with serious expressions that suggested a planned ambush. "Sit here, Sarah," said Jason, pointing to an armchair. "We need to have a serious talk." She sat down, curious to know what kind of strategy they had devised this time. "We've been thinking," began Kevin in a conciliatory tone she had never heard from him before. "Perhaps we've been a bit hard on you these past few days." "A bit hard?" Sarah repeated with disbelief. "What my brother means," Jason interjected, "is that we recognize your sacrifice over the years taking care of Dad, and we want to make it up to you." Sarah felt genuine curiosity. Where was this conversation going? "We've decided to give you $100,000 from our share of the inheritance," announced Kevin as if making a generous offer. $100,000 each, added Jason. $200,000 total. It's a considerable sum that will allow you to start a new life. The proposal was clearly an attempt to discover if she really had her own resources. If she accepted the money with excessive gratitude, it would confirm she was facing financial difficulties. "It's a generous offer," Sarah said calmly, "but I don't need your money." The answer left the two visibly disturbed. They had expected gratitude, relief, perhaps even tears of joy. "What do you mean you don't need it?" asked Jason incredulously. $200,000 is a lot of money, Sarah. "For you, perhaps," she replied with a calmness that disconcerted them even more. "For me, it's irrelevant." Kevin stood up abruptly. "What's this all about? Where did you get so much money?" "I've already said that's none of your business." "It is our business," exploded Jason. "If you have hidden resources, they could be resources that belong to Dad." The accusation was serious and offensive. Sarah felt anger rising in her chest, but maintained her composure. "Are you accusing me of theft? We're trying to understand how a woman who never worked suddenly has money to buy a house in cash," said Kevin. "I worked every day for the last 27 years, Sarah repeated firmly, "and I was properly compensated for that work." The enigmatic statement left them even more desperate for answers. They began to speculate that Sarah had discovered some secret account of their father's, or that she had sold something valuable without their knowledge. "Any asset of Dad's that you sold illegally will be recovered through the courts," threatened Jason. Sarah smiled for the first time since the conversation began. "Feel free to investigate. You have nothing on me." Her confidence was unsettling. If she were bluffing, she would certainly show nervousness in the face of legal threats. During the following week, the brothers discreetly hired a private investigator to scour Sarah's financial life. They wanted to discover the mysterious origin of her resources and, if possible, find some irregularity that could be used against her. Meanwhile, Sarah chose the house she wanted to buy and began the acquisition process. It was a charming property with a partial ocean view, 2 parking spaces in the garage, and a backyard where she could plant the flowers she had always loved. The owner was impressed by the speed and simplicity of the negotiation. Sarah presented proof of funds, signed the preliminary documents, and scheduled the transfer for the following week. "It's rare to find buyers so organized," commented the broker. "Most take months to secure financing." "I don't need financing," explained Sarah, still feeling a bit surreal saying those words. When her brothers found out she had actually bought a house, they were desperate. The investigator had found nothing irregular in her finances, confirming only that she possessed a bank account with a considerable balance. "This account has existed for 15 years, the investigator reported to Jason. "It receives regular monthly deposits of $5,000, all legal, all documented." "Deposits from where?" Kevin asked anxiously. "From an account belonging to Arthur Miller, your father." The revelation hit the 2 brothers like a bolt of lightning. Their father had been depositing money for Sarah for 15 years, hiding it from them all that time. "How much is in that account?" Jason asked, his voice choked. "Almost $1 million. The silence that followed was devastating. They had spent the last few days humiliating and threatening their sister, while she possessed almost half of what they would inherit together. "Daddy was giving money to her for 15 years, Kevin murmured in shock. "He wasn't giving it," corrected the investigator. "From the documents, it appears to be a regular payment. There are notes explaining it was compensation for care provided." The discovery completely changed the family dynamic. Suddenly, Sarah was no longer the poor, dependent sister they could mistreat with impunity. She was a woman with her own resources who had been acknowledged and rewarded by their father in a way they had never imagined. That night, they tried a different approach. "Sarah," said Jason in a conciliatory tone, "we found out about the account Dad kept for you." She looked up from the book she was reading but showed no surprise or nervousness. "You found out? We know you have almost $1 million, said Kevin, "and we understand it was Dad who saved that money for you. You understand?" Her calmness made them increasingly uncomfortable. It was as if she was always one step ahead, controlling the situation. "What we mean," continued Jason, "is that perhaps we've been unfair to you these past days." "Perhaps?" Kevin lost his patience. "Stop repeating our words like a parrot. We're trying to make peace here." Sarah closed the book and looked directly at them. "Why do you want to make peace now? What changed?" "We found out you're not poor," Jason admitted honestly. "Ah," she said with a bitter smile. "So the problem wasn't me being cruel or unfair to you. The problem was me being poor." The observation left them speechless. That was exactly it. While they thought she was vulnerable and dependent, they felt comfortable mistreating her. Now that they discovered her financial power, they wanted to make peace. It's not quite like that, Kevin tried to explain. It's exactly like that, Sarah interrupted. You treated me like trash because you thought I had nowhere to go, that I depended on your goodwill. Now that you know I can defend myself, you want to be nice. The accusation was devastatingly accurate. They really had changed their attitude only because they discovered she had her own resources. Sarah, we're siblings, said Jason, appealing to family ties. We shouldn't be fighting like this. You haven't treated me like a sister for 27 years, she replied firmly. Why should I start treating you like siblings now? The conversation ended without reconciliation. The siblings realized they had completely lost the chance to have a healthy relationship with Sarah. Years of neglect and cruelty couldn't be erased with a few words of apology. On moving day, Sarah hired a small company to transport her few personal possessions. She didn't take any furniture or valuables, just clothes, personal books, and a few items of sentimental value. Jason and Kevin watched the move with complex expressions, mixing relief at finally having the house free with a certain melancholy at seeing their sister leave for good. Do you plan to stay in touch? Asked Kevin as she was loading the last boxes onto the truck. Sarah considered the question carefully before answering. Do you want to stay in touch with me or with my money? The question was direct and cutting. Both were left speechless, because they knew their change in attitude had been motivated mainly by the discovery of her resources. When you can answer that question honestly, Sarah continued, maybe we can talk. She got into the car she had bought the previous week, a simple but reliable model, and left the property where she had spent the last decades of her life. The new house was quiet and peaceful, very different from the constant tension that had dominated the last days at her parents' house. Sarah spent the first night organizing her belongings and planning how she wanted to decorate each room. For the first time in 27 years, she was completely in charge of her own decisions. She could wake up whenever she wanted, eat what she felt like, watch her preferred TV shows, receive visitors whenever she wished. The freedom was simultaneously exciting and frightening. In the following weeks, Sarah established a completely new routine. She enrolled in a computer course for seniors, started going to a gym near the house, and began taking morning walks on the beach. She also sought out a psychologist to help her process the decades of sacrifice and the complex feelings toward her brothers. Therapy revealed that she had developed a pattern of submissive and self-sacrificing behavior that needed to be addressed. You spent so many years putting others' needs before your own that you lost touch with your own desires, explained the psychologist Dr. Jennifer. Sometimes I feel guilty for spending money on myself, Sarah confessed during a session, as if I didn't deserve it. That money was earned through your work, Dr. Jennifer reminded her. You dedicated 27 years of your life caring for another person. You deserve to be rewarded for that. Therapy helped Sarah understand that accepting the money from her father didn't make her greedy or self-interested. It was simply the recognition of a lifetime of unpaid work. 2 months after the move, she received an unexpected phone call. It was Mrs. Gladys, the elderly neighbor who had lived next to her parents' house for over 30 years. Sarah, dear, can I speak with you for a minute? The lady asked in a worried voice. Of course, Mrs. Gladys, what happened? It's about your brothers, dear. They're spreading some rumors around town that I don't like one bit. Sarah felt her stomach tighten. What kind of rumors? They're saying that you stole money from your father before he passed, that you found hidden bank accounts and withdrew everything without them knowing. The accusation was serious and potentially dangerous for her reputation in the small town where everyone knows each other. Mrs. Gladys, that's not true. I can prove that. I know it's not true, dear, the lady interrupted firmly. I've known you since you were little. I know your character. But they are convincing some people, especially those who don't know you so well. Sarah thanked her neighbor for the information and hung up the phone with a mixture of anger and disappointment. Her brothers couldn't accept that she had legitimate resources and were trying to destroy her reputation to get even. That afternoon, she sought out a lawyer. Can I sue my brothers for defamation? She asked Attorney Thomas, a respected lawyer in town. It depends on what they are saying exactly and if we can prove it's a lie, he explained. Do you have documents that prove the lawful origin of your money? Sarah presented all the deposit receipts, her father's letter, and the bank statements. The lawyer examined everything carefully. "Your case is solid," he said finally. "These documents clearly prove the deposits were made by your father as payment for the care you provided. If your brothers continue spreading lies, we can sue them." "I don't want to sue anyone," said Sarah sadly. "I just want them to stop lying about me." The lawyer suggested a less aggressive initial approach. "What if I sent them an official letter, explaining that you have documents proving the legality of your resources and that any defamation will have legal consequences?" Sarah agreed with the strategy. She wanted to give her brothers one last chance to stop the slander before taking more drastic measures. The letter was delivered to Jason and Kevin at the end of that week. The content was clear and direct. Sarah possessed complete documentation about the origin of her resources. Any accusation of irregularity would be considered defamation and would result in a lawsuit. The brothers' reaction was immediate. Jason called Sarah that same day, upset and defensive. "What's this story about suing us?" he shouted over the phone. "The story is that you are lying about me all over town," replied Sarah calmly, "and it needs to stop. We're not lying. We're just trying to understand how you got that money. I've already explained. Dad deposited money monthly into a secret account as payment for my care. I have all the documents." Jason was silent for a few seconds. "Can you prove that?" "I can, and I will, if necessary, in court." The legal threat scared them. They knew that accusing someone of theft without proof could result in serious legal consequences. All right, said Jason reluctantly. "We'll stop the comments." "I hope so," replied Sarah, "because I won't tolerate you destroying my reputation out of your own jealousy." After the phone call, the rumors died down significantly. The brothers realized Sarah was no longer the submissive woman they could intimidate with impunity. With the slander issue resolved, Sarah could focus again on building her new life. She decided to get involved in volunteer work, helping other women who had been through situations similar to hers. She sought out a local organization that offered psychological and practical support for family caregivers. Many women in the region found themselves in the same situation she had faced, dedicating their entire lives to caring for elderly or sick relatives without recognition or prospects for the future. "We want to create a more structured support program," explained Mrs. Martha, the organization's coordinator. "Something that helps these women not lose their personal identities completely." Sarah deeply identified with the cause. "I can help financially," she offered, "and also share my experience." The proposal was received with enthusiasm. Sarah began funding workshops on financial planning, self-care and skill development for caregivers. She also offered her own home for support group meetings. Volunteer work brought a new purpose to her life. She discovered that helping other women find alternatives and perspectives was deeply rewarding. One of the program participants was Mrs. Evelyn, a 60-year-old lady who had cared for her centenarian mother for nearly 2 decades. "I see myself in your story, Sarah," she said during one of the meetings. "The difference is my family never acknowledged my sacrifice." "Acknowledgement is important," Sarah agreed, "but what's most important is valuing ourselves. I spent years thinking I had no worth because no one paid me a salary for what I did." The group discussions revealed that Sarah's experience was not unique. Many women had sacrificed their personal lives to care for family members without receiving recognition or financial support. "My brother lives in Europe and sends me €50 a month," shared another participant. "He thinks that's enough to cover all the expenses for our sick mother." "At least he sends something," commented a third. "My brothers disappear whenever the conversation is about Mom." Sarah realized her situation had been exceptional. Her father had found a creative and secret way to reward her care, but most family caregivers weren't that lucky. She decided to use part of her resources to create an emergency fund for caregivers in vulnerable situations. The money would be used to cover urgent medical expenses, necessary renovations in homes adapted for the elderly, or family emergencies. The initiative caught the attention of the local press. A regional newspaper ran a story about the project, highlighting how a woman who had dedicated decades to family care was now helping others in the same situation. The report vaguely mentioned that Sarah had been adequately rewarded for her years of dedication, without going into details about the secret inheritance. Even so, the story came to the attention of her brothers. Jason called the same day it was published, clearly bothered. "I saw the story in the paper," he said without preamble. "So?" replied Sarah. "You're playing the victim publicly, as if we had treated you badly." The accusation was ironic, considering how they had actually behaved. "I don't talk about you in the interviews," Sarah clarified. "I talk about the situation of family caregivers in general. But people will make the connection. They'll think we're heartless brothers who abandoned our sister. Aren't you?" The question came out before Sarah could stop herself. The silence on the other end of the line was long and heavy. "Sarah," Jason finally said, his voice softer, "maybe we need to talk properly, like adults." "I'm willing to talk," she replied, "but it has to be an honest conversation, without ulterior motives." They arranged to meet at a neutral cafe in town. Sarah arrived punctually and found both brothers already waiting, with more serious expressions than she had seen in years. "Thank you for coming," said Kevin as she sat down. "You're welcome." Jason took a deep breath before beginning. "We wanted to apologize for the way we treated you these past few months." Sarah waited in silence, wanting to hear more before responding. "When Dad passed and we saw you were only inheriting that box," Kevin continued, "we thought it was unfair. We thought you should get more, but we also thought we deserved everything that was in the will. And when you found out I had my own resources, we were confused," admitted Jason, "and jealous, to be honest." The honesty was progress, even if painful. "Jealous of what?" asked Sarah. "Of the relationship you had with Dad," said Kevin. "We always knew he loved you more." "He didn't love me more," Sarah corrected gently. "He knew me better. You were always too busy to spend time with him." "We had our own lives," Jason defended himself, "and I didn't?" The question left them in silence again. They had never considered that Sarah had also given up her personal life to care for their father. "You chose to stay," Kevin finally said. "Chose or was forced by circumstances," Sarah retorted. "If I had left, who would have taken care of him?" "You?" The rhetorical question was met only with silence. "What we're trying to say," Jason attempted, "is that maybe we can try to rebuild our relationship as siblings." Sarah considered the proposal carefully. Part of her missed having a family, even a dysfunctional one. Another part feared they were only interested in getting close to her financial resources. "What do you expect from this rebuilt relationship?" she asked. "We hope to be a normal family," Kevin said. "Sunday lunches, birthdays, holiday parties." "Do you want that because you miss my company or because you found out I have money?" The direct question made them uncomfortable. It was hard to separate their motivations, especially since the change in attitude had coincided with the discovery of her resources. "A bit of both," Jason admitted honestly, "but mostly because we realized we lost a sister because of our selfishness." The conversation lasted 2 hours. The siblings acknowledged many of their mistakes, apologized for cruel comments, and showed genuine remorse. But Sarah remained cautious. "I need time to think," she said at the end. "I can't just forget 27 years of neglect and contempt because of one conversation." "We understand," Kevin said. "We just want you to know we're sorry." Sarah left the meeting with conflicting feelings. It was comforting to hear the apologies, but she wasn't sure she could trust their intentions. She talked about the meeting with Dr. Jennifer at the following week's therapy session. "How did you feel during the conversation?" asked the psychologist. "Relieved to hear they acknowledge their mistakes, but also suspicious that it might be too little." "Too late," Sarah replied. "Do you believe their remorse is genuine?" "I believe they feel some remorse, but I also believe the discovery of my money influenced their decision to apologize." Dr. Jennifer nodded understandingly. "It's natural for you to feel that way. Damaged family relationships aren't fixed with one conversation. So what do I do? You set your own terms. If you decide to give them a chance, you can do it gradually and with clear boundaries." The therapy helped Sarah understand that she had the right to forgive or not, to rebuild the family relationships or not. The decision was entirely hers. 2 weeks later, she called Jason. "I've decided I'm willing to try," she said, but with a few conditions. What conditions? First, no comments about my money, like how I use it or how I got it. Second, no requests for loans or investments. Third, if I feel you're using me in any way, I cut off contact for good. We agree to everything, Jason said quickly. And fourth, Sarah continued, I need to see real changes in your behavior, not just pretty words. The family rebuilding process was slow and delicate. They started with bi-weekly meetings in public places, cautious conversations about neutral topics. Gradually, the siblings showed genuine interest in Sarah's new life, her volunteer work and her personal projects. Kevin surprised her by offering practical help with the Caregiver Support Project. He had experience organizing international events and suggested ways to expand the program. I don't need your money, he clarified up front, but I can help with my professional expertise. Jason also offered contributions, suggesting partnerships with local businesses that could financially support the project. Gradually, Sarah began to believe that her siblings' remorse was genuine. They seemed to be making real efforts to make up for years of neglect. The first Sunday lunch at Jason's house was strange, but not unpleasant. His sister-in-law, Deborah, welcomed Sarah warmly, and the teenage nieces showed curiosity about the aunt they barely knew. Daddy said you took care of Grandpa all by yourself for many years, commented Chloe, Jason's youngest daughter. That must have been very hard. It was, admitted Sarah, but there were good moments too. The conversation flowed naturally during lunch. Sarah discovered that her nieces had interesting personalities and that Deborah was an intelligent and kind woman. She began to understand that she had missed years of relationship with these family members because of the conflict with her brothers. Kevin still lived abroad, but began communicating regularly via video calls. He talked about his life in Canada, his work with international consulting, and his plans to eventually return to the United States. I always use distance as an excuse, he admitted during one of the calls. But the truth is, it was more comfortable to stay away from family problems. At least you recognize that now, said Sarah. I do, and I want to change. I'm planning to come back at the end of the year and stay longer around here. The months passed, and the family relationship gradually strengthened. It wasn't perfect. There were still moments of tension and distrust, but it was genuine. Sarah began to feel that she really had a family again. The volunteer work continued to thrive. The support program for caregivers had expanded to 3 towns in the region and was serving over 100 women regularly. Sarah had become a local reference in the area, being invited to give talks and events related to the topic. At one of these talks, she met Professor Winston, a retired sociologist who studied gender and care work issues. They began an academic collaboration that gradually evolved into a close friendship. Your personal experience combined with the practical work you do could result in very interesting research, he suggested during coffee after a talk. What kind of research? About alternative models of recognition and compensation for family care work. Your father created an informal system that worked. Perhaps we can systematize it and propose it to other families. The idea intrigued Sarah. She had never considered that her particular experience could have broader applications. They began working together on a research project that documented the experiences of family caregivers and analyzed different forms of recognition and support. The work required Sarah to develop academic skills she had never used, but she discovered she had an aptitude for research and analysis. You should consider going to college, suggested Professor Winston. You have maturity and life experience that most young students don't have. The suggestion planted a seed in Sarah's mind. At 41, was it possible to start over academically? She researched college courses for adults and found several interesting options. She decided to enroll in a social work course, an area that aligned with her volunteer work and would allow her to help others in a more systematic way. When she told her brothers about her decision to return to studying, they showed genuine support. "That's so cool, Auntie," said Chloe excitedly. "You're going to be a college student." "It's a great idea," agreed Jason. "It's never too late to learn new things." Kevin, who had returned to the United States as promised, offered practical help. "If you need support with research or papers in English, I can help." The first day of classes was exciting and intimidating. Sarah was visibly older than most of her classmates, but she discovered that her maturity and life experience were advantages in understanding the concepts being studied. The professors quickly noticed her engaged and insightful participation. She brought practical examples from the volunteer work she did into the academic discussions, enriching the theoretical debates. "Your practical experience brings a different dimension to our analysis," commented Professor Lillian during a class on social policies. "It's important to have people who know the issues in practice, not just in theory." The academic recognition was gratifying. For the first time in her life, Sarah felt intellectually challenged and respected in a formal learning environment. Her research project with Professor Winston evolved into her final thesis. They documented dozens of experiences of family caregivers and developed concrete proposals for public policies that would recognize and support this work. "This study could influence social protection policies," said Professor Winston when they reviewed the final work. "You have created a genuine academic contribution." The thesis was well received by the examination board and later published in a scientific journal in the field. Sarah had become a recognized researcher, an expert in family care work. During the graduation, the whole family was present. Her siblings showed genuine pride. Her nieces took proud selfies with the college aunt, and even some participants from the caregiver support program attended the ceremony. "I never imagined I would be graduating at 43, said Sarah in her speech as the class speaker. "But I learned that it's never too late to start over, to discover new purposes, and to contribute to the world in a different way." After graduation, Sarah was invited to work as a consultant for a non-governmental organization that developed social programs for families in vulnerable situations. It was her first formal job, and she accepted it with enthusiasm. The work allowed her to apply both her academic knowledge and her practical experience. She developed projects, trained teams, and assisted families facing challenges similar to those she had overcome. "It's ironic," she commented to Dr. Jennifer during one of their last therapy sessions. "I spent 27 years feeling unproductive and worthless. Now at 44, I feel more useful and fulfilled than ever." "You were always productive and valuable," the psychologist reminded her. "The difference is that now you recognize it, and the world does too." 2 years after starting her new career, Sarah received an unexpected invitation. The Federal Social Support Agency wanted her to participate in a working group to develop national policies to support family caregivers. "Your work caught our attention," explained the agency coordinator during the phone call. "We want to incorporate your practical experience and your academic research into the new guidelines." Participation in the working group took Sarah to Washington, D.C. regularly. She worked alongside other experts, government representatives, and civil society organizations to create an unprecedented legal framework for the protection of family caregivers. "We are making history," she said to her siblings during a family dinner. "In a few years, thousands of people like me will have guaranteed rights and institutional support. It must be incredible to be part of something so important," commented Deborah with admiration. "It's surreal," admitted Sarah. "Sometimes I still can't believe I went from total invisibility to helping write federal laws." The bill the group developed was presented on Capitol Hill and sparked important debates about recognizing care work. Sarah was invited to public hearings, where she shared her personal story to illustrate the need for the proposed changes. "For 27 years, I was invisible to society," she said in one of those hearings. "I cared for another person full-time, without labor rights, without social recognition, without any future prospects. Today, millions of people in our country live that same reality." Her testimony moved the lawmakers present. Several mentioned having relatives in similar situations and acknowledged the importance of creating specific policies for this population. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, please take a moment to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It really helps us who are just starting out. Now continuing. The law was passed 2 years later, establishing basic rights for family caregivers, including access to training programs, psychological support, and proportional pension benefits based on time dedicated to care. "You helped change the country," said Professor Winston during the law's signing ceremony. "Your personal experience became public policy." Sarah watched the ceremony with a mix of emotion and disbelief. The woman who had felt useless and invisible for decades was now being recognized as one of the key architects of an important social change. After the ceremony, she visited her father's grave for the first time since the funeral. She brought a copy of the new law and placed it with the flowers at the tomb. "Thank you, Dad," she murmured, touching the headstone tenderly, "for recognizing my worth when I couldn't see it myself, for saving that money which gave me a chance to start over, and for loving me in a way I only understood later." A gentle breeze swayed the flowers, like a silent reply from her father. In the following years, Sarah continued working on implementing the new policies. She traveled across the country training teams, organizing pilot programs, and monitoring the results of the changes. She also expanded her academic work, pursuing a master's in social policy and becoming a national reference on the topic. Her research was cited in other studies, and she was regularly invited to conferences and international events. "Who would have thought the sister we so underestimated would become a national authority?" commented Kevin with pride during a family lunch. "You didn't underestimate me," corrected Sarah with a smile. "You just couldn't see beyond your own needs at the time." The relationship with her siblings had solidified on a strong foundation of mutual respect and genuine affection. It wasn't perfect. There was still occasional friction and misunderstandings, but it was real and honest. Jason had gotten divorced and was spending more time with the family, including Sarah. They discovered they had more in common than they imagined, especially an interest in literature and history. Kevin decided to settle permanently in the United States and opened an international business consultancy. He occasionally collaborated on Sarah's projects, offering expertise in organization and management. "It's funny how we almost had to lose our sister to learn to value her," reflected Jason during a conversation among the three. "Perhaps it was necessary," said Sarah philosophically. "I also needed to step away to learn my own worth." At 50, Sarah had built a life completely different from the one she had imagined possible at 40. She had a respected career, healthy family relationships, a clear purpose, and financial resources that guaranteed her independence. Most importantly, she had transformed her experience of suffering into a tool to help other people. The years of sacrifice had not been wasted. They had become the foundation for a significant social contribution. In an interview for a documentary about family caregivers, Sarah reflected on her journey. "For a long time, I thought I had wasted my life taking care of my father," she said to the cameras. "Today, I understand that those years gave me a unique understanding of love, dedication, and resilience. They were not lost years. They were years of preparation for everything that would come after." The documentary was broadcast nationally and brought even more recognition to Sarah's work. She received hundreds of messages from people who identified with her story and found hope in her path. One such message came from a 25-year-old woman who was caring for her mother with Alzheimer's. "Your story gave me hope," the young woman wrote. "I felt lost without a future. Now I see that I can care for my mother and still build a meaningful life for myself." Messages like this reminded Sarah of the real impact of her work. Every person who felt less alone, every caregiver who discovered new support resources, every family that found alternatives, all of it justified the path she had chosen. On the eve of her 51st birthday, Sarah organized a small but meaningful party. Present were her siblings and their families, Professor Winston and some close colleagues, and participants from the caregivers group who had become her friends. "I want to make a toast," she said, raising her glass of wine, "to the last 10 years which taught me that it's never too late to start over, to the coming years, which I hope will be even richer in purpose and fulfillment. And to the most valuable inheritance," added Jason, also raising his glass, "which wasn't in the yellow box but in the example of dedication and love that our sister gave us." The toast was emotional. Sarah looked around the table and saw the faces of people who truly cared about her, who valued her presence and contribution. It was so different from that terrible afternoon 10 years ago, when she had felt completely alone and worthless. After the guests had left, Sarah went up to the room where she kept the yellow box. It had become a symbol of her transformation, from an object of humiliation to a treasure of possibilities. She picked up the box and opened it once more, rereading the letter from her father that had changed her life. The words were still touching, but now she read them with a deeper understanding. Her father had not just left money for her. He had left a message of recognition, a validation of her worth, a bridge to a future she couldn't imagine at the time. More importantly, he had shown that true love finds ways to express itself even after departure. Sarah carefully closed the box and placed it in the special spot she had prepared for it in her new home. It wasn't just a memory of the past, it was a symbol of transformation, of how the most painful situations can become a foundation for renewal and growth. That night, before sleeping, she wrote in her journal, "Today I completed 10 years of my new life. I learned that no matter how long it takes us to discover our worth, what matters is never giving up the search. Dad gave me the resources to start over, but what I did with those resources was my choice. I chose to turn pain into purpose, isolation into connection, invisibility into impact. I chose well." And so the woman who had seemingly inherited only an old box discovered she had actually inherited much more: recognition, resources, and above all, the opportunity to discover who she truly was when freed to choose her own path. End of story. This was a fictional story created to touch our hearts. Now tell us what you thought. Do you believe Sarah made the right choices in rebuilding the relationship with her siblings? How would you react if you discovered a secret inheritance like this? Share your honest opinion in the comments. Leave your like if the story moved you and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss other touching stories like this one. Thank you so much for your company.